Hello and welcome back to Open Table Adventures. As always, I am Dan the Baker, and we are back here today with another episode of Recipes for Adventures, our series where I make a little recipe based on some amazing TTRPG content from across the internet. Today I am making an apple and rose custard pie for the TTRPG podcast, Spare the Crying.
Everybody is dying in the long term, so it's fine.
Now you're probably thinking I'm saying apple and rose custard pie, but it's an apple and rose custard pie. Oh, you'll see. You'll figure it out. Spare the Crying is a homebrew D&D 5e podcast produced by Dungeon Master Moon with amazing character art by one of the cast members, Cori, and other cast being May, Justice, and Neil.
The night is clear. Look up at the stars. They have a story to tell.
It is a tale of four and their adventures through a post-apocalyptic world. A place where safety can only be found in patches of land protected by guardians. Powerful fae who lend their amazing abilities in exchange for whatever sacrifices they desire.
This world is dark. After the downfall, safety is a treasure. We rebuild, we gather, we fear. So you've got gold, trinkets you can spare? Toss one in the fire. And go ahead. Our guardian here needs some recognition.
The cast consists of 5 amazing queer artists, creators, and friends who, after a year of playing TTRPGs together, decided to record a new fun adventure to show to all of you. They found inspiration in Americana folk songs, in games like Breath of the Wild, and movies like Castle in the Sky. Also, there are cowboys. And vampires. So when I first sat down to talk about this recipe, Spare the Crying was described to me as D&D fantasy meets Americana meets Western, and I immediately thought, boom, apple pie. Because what's more Americana than apple pie? Take that, Taylor Swift. The first thing we need to do for our pie is make the crust, which pie crust, in my opinion, is as easy as 1, 2, 3. That's 1 part liquid, 2 parts butter, and 3 parts flour.
Take this man out to brunch.
For our 3 parts flour, I'm going to be using 12 ounces of gluten-free baking flour. I'm also going to add just a little bit of sugar and salt. Just going to shake it up to mix it a little bit. Doesn't need to be too thorough. We're going to mix it a lot. Next, I'm going to take our 2 parts of butter, which in this case is 8 ounces of frozen, sliced up butter that I'm going to add to our flour. Just using my hands, I'm going to get in there and really incorporate that butter into the flour. If you saw my video last week where I was making puff pastry, this is a similar process, but we can go a bit further and a bit rougher when we're making pie dough. You don't want to make the butter into like butter discs like we did for the puff pastry. We want them to be like little, almost pea-sized flecks of butter that we really want to rub into the flour. We want the flour to almost look butter yellow by the time we're done. You can also use just a food processor for this if you don't want to get your hands dirty, but I love getting my hands dirty, especially with pie dough. I feel like I'm not making a pie unless I'm like, you know, wrist deep in a bunch of flour and butter. That sounded gross. Ignore that. Cut that out.
Do you own a crossbow?
No, but I think this will work, and he'll draw his sword and hold it at your throat.
Oh yeah, also, just explain why I'm going with a rose custard to go with our apple here. There's lots of themes of like flowers, wildflowers, florals throughout Spare the Crying. One of the player characters even has a full arm sleeve of flowers.
He leans back and rolls up his sleeve to show you the tattoo that's on his arm. It's essentially a trail of roses, starting at the top with vivid detail, small lines in the petals, and as it trails down towards his hand, the roses get more and more abstract until the blooms are mostly just colors at his wrist.
Which, I mean, like having plants tattooed on yourself, that's a little weird. I don't know who would do that. So we talked about doing something, you know, something bright and floral to really tie that in with the apple pie. Now you can see our butter is nice pea-sized. You can't really see in this lighting, I don't think, but the flour has gotten that buttery yellow color. So now we're gonna move on to our 1 part liquid. So the liquid can be anything you want. It can be just water, it can be milk, it can be Gatorade for all I care. In my case, I'm using an egg mixed with some water.
He's an egg slut.
Stop.
He desires eggs.
loves eggs.
Now you just want to make like a little well in the middle of your flour and butter and slowly pour in your liquid, mixing as you go, just with your hands. I chose to add an egg to this because I'm using gluten-free dough. I wanted to add that little bit extra elasticity that we get from the egg proteins. If that's too sciencey for you, don't worry about it. You might not need to use all of the liquid also. If your dough starts becoming a bit too wet and a bit too sticky, you don't have to use all of it. I'm probably gonna use all of it, just because that's how I like to make my dough. But you can also always add extra flour on top if it does become too sticky. Or on the other side, you can always add more liquid if it's too dry. Dough is starting to form together in the bowl, but I want to start forming it onto my counter. So with just a little bit of flour, I'm gonna put all my dough down. And I'm just gonna really go at it and knead until it forms a mostly cohesive dough. We don't want it to be a completely smooth ball of dough. We want it to still be a bit shaggy because we are gonna be working with this a little bit more. And we don't wanna overwork it too much or else the dough will crumble when we bake it. I'm also gonna use my bench scraper to help me out just a little bit. Don't worry if it seems a little dry and dusty. It will come together the more you work it, so you don't really want to add extra water at this point because you're probably gonna add too much water. So we formed our little dough ball. I'm gonna cut it in half. Half of this we are gonna be using for the top, half of it we're gonna be using for the bottom. I'm gonna wrap them both and put them in the fridge for about 20 minutes. And while we're waiting on that, we can work on our fillings. Now I don't want to make the custard just yet, but I can work on the apples. So for the apple filling, I have here 4 moderately sized Honeycrisp apples and 2 lemons. I'm gonna peel and cut my apples. Okay, so while that fool is doing that, I want to tell you a little bit about the player characters of Spare the Crying. First, there's Virgil Flores, who's played by Cori. They are a human blood hunter with cold hands who dreams of early retirement and a garden to tend. Next, there's Oxalis Campfear, or just Ox, played by Justice, who's a gunslinging cowboy of an elf with rough hands and a soft heart. Then there's Henry, who's played by Neil, who's a golden tiefling ranger with a knack for getting himself into trouble and getting out of it unscathed. Well, mostly. Lastly, there's Keon Lionos, who's played by May, who's a celestial warlock full of yearning, who occasionally bites people. All under the watchful guidance of Game Master Moon, who plays NPCs like Lo, or the powerful fae like the Brownie Queen or the Devil, and everything in between. Join this group as they travel their world by train across thin ley lines that connect islands of safety, learning more and more about the shadows of the past and the mysteries of the present as they go. So my apples are cut. I cut them a little chunky, a little rough, because I wanted to kind of convey that rusticy-ness that kind of you get from like the Western Americana style of apples. On top of my apples, I'm gonna add a little bit of sugar. And in a moment of sacrilege that probably only I will care about, I am not going to be adding cinnamon to these apples. Mostly because since this is going to be paired with that rose custard, cinnamon and those florals don't really mix in my opinion. But the cinnamon is there in my heart, of course. So you could just leave it here if you wanted to, but I want to add a little bit of lemon because the lemon will kind of bridge the gap between the floral rose custard and the sweet apples. So I'm going to add the zest of 2 lemons. And then just the juice of 1 of them. I'm gonna give it all just a little mix. And to top it off, I'm gonna add some flour. This will just help all of the juices kind of like mix together and make like a more solid base for us, and also won't seep into the pie dough and make a soggy bottom. How dare. I can put this aside until we're ready to mix.
And you hear a knocking sound above you and a low voice. Hey.
Ox is gonna fucking turn around and...
Now it's time to roll out the base. I have here my disc of dough, my rolling pin, and I also have my pie dish, just so I can like check the measurements as I'm going. I'm gonna lightly flour my surface and flour the dough and roll out as evenly as possible, turning the dough as many times as I feel necessary or comfortable doing. My goal is to get this probably about 1/4 of an inch thick, maybe a little bit thicker, and big enough to, fit in the pie tin. And every now and then I'm just gonna take my pie tin, hold it over the dough, see how much more I have left to go. I'm almost there. Now it looks like it's the size that I want. So what I'm gonna do is take my rolling pin, carefully lift up the edge and roll the dough back onto the rolling pin. Ta-da. Put my pie tin in front, carefully lift up and unroll the dough on top. And now I'm just gonna press everything in. If I see any tears or gaps, I will fix those in just a second. You wanna make sure there's no air pockets at the base. You wanna make sure that the dough goes all the way into the corner of the tin. I don't know why I keep saying tin. It's not a tin, it's a dish. Whatever. To fix the holes, I am gonna wet my fingers a little bit and kind of just massage them. That's a gross way to put it.
It was cursed, and it gave me a long-acting curse.
Massage them together. Possibly taking some of the excess dough, creating a bit of a paste to, it's like we're doing surgery. This is Grey's Anatomy. Yeah. Luckily I don't have too many tears, but I will fix the ones that I have and be right back. I'm also gonna make sure I remove some of the excess and make sure I have dough all the way around on this lip, because I wanna make sure we have a lip to our pie. And I'm just gonna roughly remove the excess a little bit. We wanna, it's okay if we leave a little bit hanging over because the dough will shrink and come to form as it bakes. And you can save the extra pie dough as well for when we get to our topping. Our base is ready. I'm gonna stick it in the freezer until we're ready to fill. Now for the topping, I'm gonna make a lattice. If you want, you can just roll out a flat piece, drape it over the filled pie, and then cut some slits at the top, some air holes, and you can be done with it. I'm extra and I hate myself, so I'm making a lattice. I'm gonna bring you a little bit closer so you can see better. Okay, so we brought you up close and personal to do our lattice topping. First, I'm gonna take our excess and I'm gonna incorporate it into the dough that we already have, just because I don't want it to go to waste. And then to start, I'm gonna do exactly the same thing I did to make the base. I want to talk a second about something that Spare the Crying is supporting over the next couple of weeks, and that is Operation Olive Branch. Operation Olive Branch is a project trying to help families in Palestine who are currently suffering under the Israeli regime. They're trying to get them food, water, clothing, shelter, anything they need to survive. There are links in the description on how you can help. Now that I have my dough where I want it, thickness-wise, I'm gonna take my little rotary cutter. I am not sponsored by New York Cakes, but I can be. Hit me up. And I'm gonna just square off the edges a little bit, taking off these ragged bits. I'm gonna move all of this onto a sheet of parchment paper. It'll just make my life so much easier in the long run. All right, now I have this where I want it, and I'm going to strip. Nope. Not that kind of YouTube video. I'm going to make strips out of my dough. If I wanted to be, more exact, I would measure this out, make sure everything is the exact same length. But since I'm making this a little bit more rustic, I think it'll be nice if I have a variety of widths here. Now that I have all of my strips, I'm gonna take away some of them carefully. So I have here a little over half of our dough. And what I'm gonna do is half of these, I'm going to fold over about 50% of the way. Alternating. Bada bing, bada boom. Then I'm gonna take one of our strips that we took away and go horizontal, perpendicular. Yeah, that's the word. And then redo that. I'm not explaining this with words well, but I hope you're a visual learner because this is gonna look very pretty. And then I'm going to repeat that, but lifting back the ones I did not lift back before. So the ones that are under that one perpendicular. And then take another. And then I'm gonna space them out. I'm gonna try not to space them out evenly because again, I want to convey that rusticness. Rustic is just a way of saying messy, but I think that's fun. Our lattice, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my rolling pin and just lightly roll over the whole thing. Lightly, lightly, lightly. This will just kind of marry the strips all together and make it easier to take them apart later. Now I'm gonna take this whole thing, put it in the freezer until we're ready to use it. Now with our remaining dough, I am going to make a little bit extra like accoutrements. Just add a little, you know, je ne sais quoi. I don't know why I'm speaking French. I'm gonna make little stars and flowers to add to the top of the lattice. To make the star, I'm just gonna grab like a ball, roll it, and then I'm just gonna pinch the top and the bottom, flatten it, repinch, flatten it, repinch, just until I get it into that shape that I want of that little 4-pointed star. I do want this fairly flat, just so it'll bake well, if need be. Ta-da! Do a couple of those various sizes. I also want to make a little, like, wreath almost, a little flowery wreath. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a long tube of dough. And then with my knife, I'm just going to cut little bits like this, about 1/3 to half of the way down. And then just with my fingers, I'm gonna separate them, just kind of shape them into like little leaves. Now I'm gonna make some flowers to go on top of it.
So you're a bit of a botanical artist then?
To make the flower, I'm gonna start by making just a base that I'm gonna build up on. It's a little disc, just like that. And then taking just small bits of dough at a time, I'm going to flatten them into little petal shapes and add them on top, just like that. Just do that until I'm all the way around. I'm just gonna make a little ball that's gonna be kind of like where the seed stuff are. I'm gonna pretty this up a little bit, add a little bit extra dough here and there. I'm gonna finish making all of my add-ons and I'm gonna stuff all of this into the freezer with our lattice, and then I'm gonna meet you over at the stove to do our custard. For our custard, I have here equal parts heavy cream and whole milk that I'm gonna heat up until just below a boil. Next, I'm gonna add our rose water. Now, I don't wanna add too much or else it's just gonna taste like soap, which if you like, you do you. I also don't wanna add too little or else it's gonna taste like nothing. Then I have my egg yolks that I'm gonna add to this bowl, and now I'm gonna add some sugar right on top of it and whip until it's a pale yellow. I'm also gonna add some flour and mix that in as well. Once my cream has come to the right temperature, I am going to slowly pour it into the egg mixture, whisking the whole time. And now, while the custard is still hot, I want to mix in some butter. So I'm gonna throw it in, let it melt a little bit, and mix. And there we go. Okay, now it's time to assemble. So obviously I have here my base pie dough. I'm gonna start by adding in our custard. And now right on top of that, I'm going to add our apples. The apples will sink just right into the bottom, but that's fine. Next, I'm gonna take a little bit of egg wash. I'm just gonna wash the edge of the pie here. This will just help for when I get the topping out for it to stick on top. Now I have my toppings, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my lattice and just invert it on top of the pie. Careful, careful, go. Oh, I'm a wizard. I'm a motherfucking wizard. And humble. I'm gonna remove the excess that I have on the side here. I'm just gonna make sure that the lattice is touching on all sides. I'll give it a quick egg wash. And I'm gonna stick my add-ons on top. And then I'm also gonna give a light egg wash on all of the toppings. Now this is ready for me to just throw in the oven that I've had preset at 375 for 45 minutes to an hour. See you then.
No, not now.
It's still early, it's not dark
Next
out.
time.
And there we have it, folks. Here is our apple and rose custard pie for Spare the Crying. Roll the glamour shots. Thank you all so much for coming with me on this pie journey. Make sure you check out Spare the Crying. They are available anywhere you want to listen to your podcast. All their links are down below. Make sure you check out the Olive Branch Project as well. Spare the Crying will be supporting them over the next couple of weeks. All those links are down below as well. Make sure you stick around here to Open Table Adventures to see more recipes, one-shots and actual plays, interviews, and so much more. As always, I have been Dan the Baker. This has been Open Table Adventures, and you are always welcome to pull up a seat. Bye-bye.
If you give a call, I'll come running. Doesn't matter how far. So, until we meet again.